In the pantheon of Tibetan history, few figures loom as large as King Songtsen Gampo. His story is one of conquest and diplomacy, of spiritual enlightenment and cultural revolution. He wasn't just a ruler, he was the architect of a new era, a man who unified disparate tribes and laid the foundation for the mighty Tibetan Empire. Today, I am going to tell you the story of King Songtsen Gampo, a tale that begins not with a crown, but with a legacy of ambition and a vision that would forever change the destiny of a nation. The roof of the world, a land before a king. High above the clouds, where the air is thin and the mountains kiss the sky, lies Tibet, often called the roof of the world. But in the early 7th century, this land was not yet the great empire we remember. It was divided, fragmented, and ruled by clans constantly at war with each other. Life was harsh. The land was beautiful, yes, with its snow-capped peaks and vast plateaus, but survival demanded strength. Nomadic tribes roamed with their yaks and sheep, farmers worked on the few fertile valleys, and shamans guided the people with ancient rituals of the Bon religion, a faith filled with spirits, oracles, and mountain gods. At this time, Tibet was not yet a single nation. It was a collection of tribes and small kingdoms, each ruled by powerful chieftains. Rivalries and blood feuds were common. To dream of a united Tibet seemed impossible. But history often writes its most powerful stories in impossible times. And from these divided lands, a child would be born, one who would unite the tribes, forge an empire, and open Tibet to the world. That child was Songtsen Gampo. Around the year 617 CE, in the Yarlung Valley of southern Tibet, a royal child was born. His father, Namri Songtsen, was the ruler of the Yarlung dynasty, a powerful clan among the many Tibetan tribes. His mother, noble and wise, carried within her the hopes of her people. From the moment of his birth, legends say, strange signs filled the sky. Some claim that the stars shone brighter that night, as if announcing the arrival of a destined ruler. Others whispered that the mountain gods themselves bowed to him. The child was named Songtsen Gampo. In his early years, he was raised in the shadow of the mountains, trained like every noble child in riding, archery, hunting, and the art of war. But unlike other children, he was said to have a sharp mind, quick to learn, and filled with curiosity. When he listened to the shamans and priests of the Bon religion, he questioned them with boldness. When he heard stories of distant lands, India, Nepal, and China, he dreamed of Tibet not as a land of scattered tribes, but as a great power among nations. But fate soon tested him. When Songtsen was still a young boy, his father, King Namri Songtsen, was assassinated by poison, killed by rival factions who feared his growing power. The kingdom was thrown into chaos. Many believed the young prince would never survive the storm of enemies waiting to seize control. Yet Songtsen Gampo did not break. Even as a teenager, he showed the courage of a seasoned warrior. With loyal allies of the Yarlung clan, he crushed rival chieftains and reclaimed the throne. By the time he reached adulthood, he was not only the king of Yarlung, but the rising power who would one day unite all Tibet under one banner. The boy born under omens of destiny was now ready to prove that destiny true. As Songtsen Gampo grew into manhood, Tibet was still a land divided. The Great Plateau was carved into territories controlled by fierce chieftains. Each clan guarded its independence, and wars between them were endless. But Songtsen was different. He was not content with ruling a single valley. He dreamed of a united kingdom, a Tibet strong enough to stand equal with India, Nepal, and China. He began by reorganizing his own forces. The Yarlung army, once a small band of warriors, was forged into a disciplined force. He introduced military reforms, trained his soldiers in new tactics, and armed them with weapons stronger than before. Then he marched. One by one, he defeated rival clans. Some surrendered, others resisted and were crushed. His reputation spread like wildfire, a king young in years but powerful in vision and strength. But conquest alone was not enough. Songtsen knew that a lasting empire required more than victory on the battlefield. So he used diplomacy, marrying noblewomen from other tribes, granting titles to loyal allies and weaving together the scattered clans into one political system. By his late 20s, Songtsen Gampo had achieved the impossible. The plateau, once torn apart by rivalry, now stood united under his rule. For the first time in history, Tibet was not just a land of tribes, it was an empire. From his new capital at Lhasa, he began to dream even bigger. Tibet would no longer be an isolated land hidden among the mountains. It would step into the world stage, forming alliances, waging wars, and becoming a bridge between great civilizations. The age of Songtsen Gampo had begun. With Tibet now united, Songtsen Gampo turned his eyes outward. The world beyond the mountains was vast and full of powerful neighbors. The Tang dynasty in China, the Lichavi kingdom of Nepal, and the Great Plains of Central Asia. For centuries, Tibet had been a hidden land, remote and isolated. But under Songtsen Gampo, isolation was no longer an option. To survive and to flourish, Tibet needed to stand among the great powers. So the young emperor built an army unlike any Tibet had ever seen. It was said to number in the tens of thousands, with soldiers trained in mounted warfare, archery, and siege tactics. The once small tribal bands had become a formidable imperial force. From his capital in Lhasa, Songtsen launched campaigns that extended his reach across the plateau and beyond. He conquered neighboring kingdoms, subduing them into vassal states. Trade routes once unsafe now came under Tibetan control. But his most daring ambitions lay with China. Around 634 CE, Songtsen sent envoys to the Tang emperor, Taizong, requesting a marriage alliance with a Chinese princess. The Tang court, proud and powerful, refused. For them, Tibet was a barbarian land, unworthy of royal kinship. Songtsen Gampo did not forget the insult. Legend says he sent his armies eastward, striking at the Chinese frontier. The Tibetans stormed through the border defenses and even threatened the Tang capital. Shocked by Tibet's strength, the Chinese emperor reconsidered. By 641 CE, a treaty was reached, and with it came one of the most famous marriages in Tibetan history. Songtsen Gampo would wed Princess Wencheng, niece of the Tang emperor. But China was not the only ally he sought. Around the same time, Songtsen married Princess Bhrikuti Devi, daughter of the king of Nepal. These alliances would change Tibet forever, bringing with them not only peace and diplomacy, but also a new religion, a new culture, and a new identity for the Tibetan people. The warrior king had proven his might. Now, destiny called him towards something greater than conquest, the transformation of Tibet's spirit. Songtsen Gampo had proven himself a conqueror, but he was more than a man of war. He understood that true greatness was not built by the sword alone, but also by alliances, culture, and ideas. 2 marriages would define his reign, and the destiny of Tibet. The Nepalese princess, Bhrikuti Devi. Long before his alliance with China, Songtsen Gampo sought ties with the Lichavi kingdom of Nepal. Around 632 CE, he married Princess Bhrikuti Devi, daughter of King Amshuvarma. Bhrikuti was more than a queen, she was a devout Buddhist. With her came artists, craftsmen, and holy texts from the Kathmandu Valley. Under her influence, Buddhism began to take root in Tibet. It is said she brought with her sacred images, including a statue of Akshobhya Buddha, which was enshrined in the Ramoche temple of Lhasa. Nepalese artisans also helped design the great Jokhang temple, which still stands today as the spiritual heart of Tibet. Through Bhrikuti, Tibet first touched the light of Buddhism. The Chinese princess, Wencheng. But the marriage that echoed across Asia was his union with Princess Wencheng, niece of the Tang emperor. When Songtsen's proposal was first refused, Tibet's armies had stormed China's western borders, forcing the Tang to reconsider. To secure peace, the marriage was arranged in 641 CE. Wencheng arrived in Tibet with a grand entourage, carrying treasures of Chinese culture, silk, literature, astronomy, medicine, and most importantly, a statue of the young Buddha Shakyamuni, which was placed in the Jokhang temple. She also brought agricultural knowledge, new seeds, farming techniques, and technologies that enriched Tibetan life. But beyond material gifts, both princesses carried something far greater, the Dharma. Together, Bhrikuti and Wencheng inspired Songtsen Gampo to embrace Buddhism. A cultural transformation. With their influence, Tibet began a profound transformation. The old Bon rituals did not vanish, but Buddhism started to merge with Tibetan beliefs, creating a unique spiritual path. Temples rose in Lhasa, and sacred scriptures were translated into Tibetan. Songtsen Gampo was no longer just a warrior king. He was becoming a Dharma king, a ruler who guided not only the bodies of his people but their souls. The marriages of Songtsen Gampo were not simply unions of love or politics. They were turning points in history, the bridges through which Buddhism, art, and culture flowed into Tibet, shaping the identity of a civilization for centuries to come. The marriages of Songtsen Gampo brought not just peace and alliances, but a spiritual revolution. For centuries, Tibet had followed the Bon religion, an ancient tradition of mountain gods, spirits, and rituals. It was powerful and deeply rooted, but it offered little of the vast philosophical teachings that shaped India, Nepal, and China. Now, through Princess Bhrikuti Devi of Nepal and Princess Wencheng of China, a new faith entered the land of snows, Buddhism. Temples of light. To honor his queens and their faith, Songtsen Gampo ordered the construction of great temples. The most famous of these was the Jokhang Temple in the heart of Lhasa. Built with the help of Nepalese craftsmen, it became the holiest site in all Tibet, the place where the statue of the Buddha brought by Princess Wencheng was enshrined. Alongside it rose the Ramoche Temple, where Bhrikuti's sacred image of Akshobhya Buddha was housed. These temples were not just buildings, they were symbols. For the first time, the Tibetan people could see, touch, and worship the Buddha. The written word. But Songtsen Gampo's vision went beyond temples. He realized that for Buddhism to truly take root, Tibet needed a language capable of preserving its teachings. Until then, Tibetan writing was limited. So he commissioned his minister, Thonmi Sampoda, to travel to India and study scripts. From Sanskrit, Thonmi devised a new Tibetan alphabet, a script that could record not only Buddhist texts, but the laws, culture, and history of Tibet. This was one of Songtsen Gampo's greatest gifts to his people, a written language that carried the Dharma and the wisdom of centuries into Tibetan life. The Dharma king. Over time, the king himself embraced Buddhism. Legends say he was an incarnation of Avalokiteshvara, the bodhisattva of compassion. His queens, Bhrikuti and Wencheng, were seen as manifestations of Tara, the divine protectress. Under his reign, Buddhist teachings spread across the plateau. Monks arrived, scriptures were translated, and the seeds of a spiritual tradition were planted. Of course, the old Bon religion did not disappear. For centuries, it would blend and clash with Buddhism until eventually the two became intertwined. But the beginning had been made. Songtsen Gampo was no longer just the unifier of tribes, nor simply the conqueror of lands. He was becoming something greater, a spiritual emperor, the man who gave Tibet its script, its temples, and its first embrace of the Dharma. History records Songtsen Gampo as a warrior, a reformer, and a builder of temples. But to the Tibetan people, he was something far greater. His life was wrapped in legends, his deeds told not only as history, but as sacred myth. The incarnation of Avalokiteshvara. Buddhist tradition remembers Songtsen Gampo as no ordinary man. He was said to be an emanation of Avalokiteshvara, the bodhisattva of infinite compassion. His mission was not merely to rule a kingdom, but to guide a people toward enlightenment. In this vision, his two queens, Bhrikuti and Wencheng, were believed to be manifestations of green Tara and white Tara, divine protectresses who stood by his side as he transformed Tibet. Thus, every act of his rule, every war, every temple, every law was seen not as mere politics, but as the unfolding of a divine plan. The Demoness of Tibet. One of the most famous Tibetan legends tells of the land itself. It was said that Tibet's plateau was shaped like a giant demoness lying upon the earth, her body blocking the spread of Buddhism. To subdue her, Songtsen Gampo built temples on key points of her body, pinning her down with sacred power. The greatest of these was the Jokhang Temple in Lhasa, constructed upon her heart. With each temple, the demoness grew weaker, until finally Buddhism could flourish across the plateau. Miraculous tales. Other stories tell of Songtsen Gampo's wisdom and power. That he could see far into the future, guided by visions of Avalokiteshvara. That he tamed fierce mountain spirits and converted them into protectors of the Dharma. That his voice carried such authority, even wild animals bowed before him. Whether these tales are truth or myth, they reveal how deeply the Tibetan people revered him. To them, he was not only their emperor, he was their spiritual guardian. The sacred vision. In later centuries, Tibetans would often look upon the great statues of Avalokiteshvara and see in his face the features of Songtsen Gampo. He had become more than history. He was memory, myth, and living faith. To this day, when pilgrims walk the streets of Lhasa, they remember the Dharma king not just as the founder of an empire, but as a divine being who shaped the destiny of a nation. Songtsen Gampo's greatness did not rest only on the battlefield or in the temples. He understood that an empire could not survive on conquest alone. It needed order, justice, and vision. So he set about creating something Tibet had never seen before, a system of governance for a united nation. The law codes. Until his reign, Tibet was ruled by tribal customs and unwritten traditions. Justice often meant vengeance, and disputes ended in bloodshed. Songtsen Gampo changed this. He introduced a written code of law, said to be one of the first in Tibetan history. These laws were simple but revolutionary, limiting blood feuds, protecting property, and establishing clear punishments for crimes. They gave Tibet not just the might of the sword, but the stability of justice. The 12 ministers. To govern his vast new empire, Songtsen Gampo appointed a council of ministers. Each was chosen for loyalty and skill, and together they formed the backbone of the Tibetan state. Among them, the most famous was Thonmi Sampoda, the scholar who created the Tibetan script. Others oversaw military affairs, foreign relations, and the economy. Through this council, Songtsen transformed a tribal monarchy into a true imperial administration. A capital of power, Lhasa. Songtsen Gampo moved his capital to Lhasa, turning it into the political and spiritual heart of Tibet. Here, not only temples, but palaces were built. Tradition speaks of the first foundations of what would later become the Potala Palace, the grand fortress monastery that still towers over Lhasa today. From this capital, trade routes were secured, armies organized, and cultural exchange with China, Nepal, and India flourished. A vision beyond his time. Songtsen's governance was remarkable for its balance. He was fierce in war, but fair in law. He honored Buddhism, but did not erase the Bon tradition, allowing it to continue alongside the new faith. He sought expansion, but also diplomacy, binding Tibet to the great civilizations around it. By the middle of the 7th century, Tibet was no longer a collection of tribes. It was a rising empire, stable, powerful, and respected. And at its heart stood a king who combined the strength of a warrior with the wisdom of a statesman. By the mid-7th century, Songtsen Gampo had ruled for decades. He had united the tribes, built an empire, and planted the seeds of Buddhism in Tibetan soil. His fame stretched far beyond the plateau to the Tang dynasty of China, the kingdoms of Nepal and India, and the vast trade routes of Central Asia. But even the mightiest of kings cannot escape time. The emperor's twilight. In his later years, Songtsen Gampo turned increasingly towards spiritual life. He continued to support the building of temples, the translation of scriptures, and the establishment of monasteries. His queens remained at his side, guiding him with their devotion to the Dharma. Yet his body, worn by years of campaigning and ruling, began to weaken. Around 649 CE, the great Dharma king fell ill. Chroniclers tell us that he died in his early 30s, though some traditions say he lived longer. His death, like much of his life, is veiled in mystery. A nation in mourning. When news spread across Tibet that the king had passed, grief swept the land. He was not only their ruler, but their unifier, their protector, and to many, their living God. In the valleys and mountains, people lit lamps and offered prayers. In Lhasa, monks and priests chanted sutras for his soul. The temples he had built became places of pilgrimage, filled with tears and devotion. The immortal king. Though his body was gone, Songtsen Gampo was never truly seen as dead. In the hearts of the Tibetan people, he remained alive, as Avalokiteshvara, the bodhisattva of compassion, watching over his land. Legends say his spirit lingered in the Jokhang temple, in the sacred statues his queens brought, and in the very mountains of Tibet. And in the centuries that followed, when Tibet rose again under new kings and lamas, they looked back to Songtsen Gampo as the first great Dharma king, the model of what a Tibetan ruler should be. Centuries have passed since the reign of Songtsen Gampo, yet his shadow still stretches across the mountains of Tibet. He was more than a king. He was the architect of a civilization, the father of Tibet. Historians remember him as the founder of the Tibetan Empire. It was he who first united the scattered tribes into a single kingdom. He created a system of law, built a capital in Lhasa, and opened Tibet to the world through diplomacy, conquest, and trade. Every Tibetan ruler who came after him walked in his footsteps. The Dharma king. Buddhists remember him differently, as a spiritual monarch. Through the influence of his queens, Bhrikuti of Nepal and Wencheng of China, he brought Buddhism into Tibet. He built the Jokhang and Ramoche temples, established the Tibetan script through Thonmi Sampoda, and ensured the Dharma would be written, taught, and practiced across generations. Without Songtsen Gampo, Tibet might have remained a land of tribal wars. With him, it became a land of monasteries, scriptures, and a faith that blended with its mountains and people. A living legend. In Tibetan tradition, Songtsen Gampo is not just a memory. He is worshipped as an incarnation of Avalokiteshvara, the bodhisattva of compassion. His queens, Bhrikuti and Wencheng, are revered as Tara, protectresses of the faith. Every pilgrim who bows before the golden statue in the Jokhang temple bows also to him, the king who made that temple possible. And in the great Potala palace that rises above Lhasa, Tibetans see not only the home of later Dalai Lamas, but the legacy of the first Dharma king who dreamed of such greatness. A legacy that endures. Songtsen Gampo's vision shaped Tibet's destiny. A nation forged in unity. A people guided by the Dharma. A culture that blended the wisdom of India, Nepal, and China, yet remained uniquely Tibetan. More than 1,300 years after his death, his name is still spoken with reverence. In the chanting of monks, in the prayers of pilgrims, in the stories told by elders, he lives on. Songtsen Gampo was not merely a king. He was a builder of nations, a bringer of faith, and in the eyes of his people, a living God. And so, on the high winds of the Himalayas, his spirit still whispers, a reminder that even from the harshest land, greatness can rise, and from one king's vision, a civilization can be born.